Chair would like to now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Farenthold, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to have to echo the gentleman from Oregon's concern about some of the taxes, fees, and potential lack of transparency with the regulations requiring complete disclosure of the cost of a ticket. We're losing transparency as to the fact sometimes over 20% of a ticket is actually taxes and fees. I do think we're in a position in this committee. I'm surprised that of all the committees I sit on, we all seem very much concerned about the same issues, and I do remain concerned about that and would like to remain posted on that. Further, Chairman Schuster visited with Mr. Callio a little bit about the small and medium-sized airports and how they're affected by the consolidation in the airline industry. The district I represent, our big commercial airports are Corpus Christi. We've got we're fortunate to have Southwest, United, and American in, but we do not have a SkyTeam carrier, and we're the smallest market Southwest covers. And if we lose them, there's a real concern. The other major metropolitan area we have is Victoria. It's an essential air service, and all it's got is a small prop plane to Houston, an independent carrier, which I'd like to get copies of the information you provide to Chairman Schuster as well, please. I'd also like to ask you, Virgin America is probably the first new airline that's come about, and that's been quite some time. Can you talk about some of the impediments to entry of new carriers?
I'd have to say that in terms of entry of new carriers, I'm not a particular expert on that. We could provide you information on that. Historically, however, the industry has had low impediments to entry if you've got the money and can handle the capital costs.
Money's always an impediment, I would guess.
I'm sorry?
Money's always an impediment to what you want to do.
Right, but again, historically, many organizations, people have started airlines, not quite at the drop of the hat, but you can get an airline up and running relatively easily, I think. So I would prefer to get back to you on that.
All right, and then let me go to Mr. Brewer now and talk a little bit about access to airports. With the American Airlines and U.S. Air merger, there was some emphasis on access to airports here in Washington, LaGuardia, and Dallas Love Field. To what extent does this create a problem for? Again, I'm going to stick with new carriers or the up and coming folks. I mean, how do we address this problem? Is NextGen going to solve it by creating more capacity, more slots? I mean, in Washington, there's no real estate to park the airplanes. Is there a solution to this problem?
No, I think, pardon me, I believe that the real issue is access to DCA in particular. I'll give you our example in Manchester. I'm sorry, sir. 4 flights a day into DCA. With the merger of American Airlines and U.S. Airways, those slots are in jeopardy. There are 74 slots a day into DCA that are allocated toward commuter aircraft. The definition of commuter aircraft are those with 76 seats or less. But there are now more than those 74 commuter flights coming into DCA. So now with the merger, U.S. Airways and American need to get mainline service in to protect the market share that they currently have.
So are you suggesting that there ought to be, that the carriers need to be bringing in these capacity-controlled airports, need to be bringing the bigger jets in so they have more people, or?
I'm suggesting there's 2 issues that, in my understanding, little understanding it is of the airline industry, there's two words that we need to always remember. One is yield and one is demand. Yield is what keeps your existing flights flying. The airlines need to make a certain percentage of profit on every flight or it's gone. And demand is what creates the need for additional flights.
Okay. I appreciate it. I have one other question I want to address to Mr. Watkin and Mr. Callio, and that is the FCC has recently talked about allowing cell phone usage on airplanes. I got in a big argument with my family. Forget safety, but there's an annoyance factor there. But do the folks you represent in your union and do the airlines have a particular take on that? It's my take. The government needs to stay out of it. The market will decide that. But I'd like to hear both of your gentlemen's opinions on that.
Thank you for the question. We have publicly said that we support any legislation to not allow it. It's one thing to allow the use of smartphones on aircraft for other purposes, including being on the Internet, et cetera. But we are against cell phone use. We think it's disruptive not only to passengers but to the employees on the flight that need to service that plane. We think it creates a potentially very chaotic environment. And since things happen on air flights that we don't want to see happen, when they do, I think if you've got a cabin full of passengers that are using their phones for calls, we think it's very disruptive and not consistent with what we think is a good, safe, and consumer-friendly environment. And lastly, I think it's important to note that when you allow this to happen, the frontline employees, the flight attendants, are going to be the ones that are going to be forced to arbitrate disputes inside that cabin when it's determined that there should not be cell phone use. It's going to be the frontline employees.
And I'm out of time. If the Chair will indulge me in letting Mr. Callio answer, I'll yield back at the conclusion of his answer.
Congressman, I'm busy on a call.